even a law which is unconstitutional, it's not the end in itself. The Constitutional Court is there to make sure that whatever resolution or whatever law is passed or whatever anything is done is constitutional. That is why you hear so many laws which have been challenged, and the Constitutional Court has declared them fully unconstitutional. So I really don't see any cause for alarm. And you see, there is that argument he advanced earlier on, that there is no separation of powers. I may agree that at times there might be some overlaps where one executive arm of government overlaps and enters into the jurisdiction or the mandate of the other. But that doesn't mean that there is no separation of power. Like in this very, very particular case, the powers to appoint and disappoint, like he correctly pointed out, the ministers is with the president. And I think what we're suffering here is actually in respect to interpretation. For example, I think most of those people are advancing moral arguments. Morally, yes, I do agree that once somebody has been accused, and he has to step aside and investigation has to go on. But if we are to stick to the law, legally speaking, the resolution must be binding. And that resolution, to me, is not binding. There is, like he pointed out, there is nothing called contempt of parliament. And if the law does not provide for anything, where do you get the powers to actually charge and convict someone? Mr. Basalirwa is very aware that in our laws, you cannot take somebody to court over a non-existing offense. He has also correctly pointed that out, that there is no law, the law does not provide for contempt of parliament. Now, having found that there is no law that provides for contempt of parliament.
So, Mr. Luzige, what is the boundaries? Where does the power of a parliamentary resolution stop? They pass budgets, they appoint approve of ministers. Where is the line? Where does the power stop?
Parliament has been brought to work in conjunction. It is not an end in itself. What it is attempting to do right now is to actually overlap and go into another arm of government, the role of another arm of government. The wording of that very resolution was wrong. Parliament should have recommended to the president, or should have moved the president to take action against his ministers. But for a resolution of Parliament to say that so and so must step aside is actually is unconstitutional and is overlapping it. Parliament overlapped its mandate. That's my opinion. Without actually, I know people are calling and say, well, Mr. Luzige is attempting to defend the ministers, but if you called us, or you have called me to give a legal opinion, to the best of my understanding and knowledge, I do believe and I do feel that there is a problem with that resolution, and that is why even Parliament itself referred the issue to its committee, which is in charge of its rules and provisions. Now, for Mr. Basalirwa to come, of course, that's what Mr. Basalirwa wants the public to believe. But there is a constitutional crisis. There cannot be a constitutional crisis when all the arms of government are functioning. I am even very sure that if these ministers are not given a fair trial, they can still go to the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court can give its interpretation. I am so impressed with the committee chaired by Mr. Fox Odoi. It has called people of different opinions, experts. It has called professors in law. It has called people to come and actually attempt to explain. But you see, that in itself is an indication that there is a problem, because contempt of parliament in our laws does not exist, and it is a very cardinal, clear principle of our laws. You cannot charge anybody and command him to appear before anybody, whether court or not, when the offense does not exist. That's my opinion.
Mr. Basalirwa, is it possible for them to be dismissed as MPs if the executive doesn't want to act on it? Can Parliament dismiss them as members of Parliament?
No, Parliament cannot, because first of all, there can only be an impeachment, as you're aware. Alternatively, unless they are recalled by their electorate. Right. In the absence of that is the scenario I'm explaining about a constitutional crisis. We are talking about a paralysis here. You are talking about a resolution of Parliament, and I think let's make the discussion simpler for our listeners. We are basically talking about deliberately disobeying or disregarding a parliamentary resolution. Now, you can choose any diction you want. You can choose to call it contempt.
Right.
You can choose to call it any word. But we are talking about disregarding and disobeying. And put it in perspective. If Parliament makes a resolution and the one to whom that resolution is addressed does not act on it, then two things. What do we call that? And number two, what should be the consequences? That is it. Because you see, it is easier for you to find comfort in the statement that there is nothing called contempt of Parliament in our laws. You can easily find an escape route there. But let's simplify the argument to say, where somebody disobeys or disrespects a law, a regulation, can even be decorum of public authority.
Yes.
What do we call that? And what should be the consequences for that? So there is no way you are going to escape from that. Number two, there is nothing illegal, there is nothing unconstitutional about Parliament passing a resolution calling on ministers to step aside. There is nothing illegal about that.
Yes.
And that would actually directly flow from its mandate provided for under Article 79 of the Constitution.
Right.
So, in my opinion, there is nothing out of the ordinary. And I'm telling you that in jurisdictions where the offense of contempt of Parliament is not specifically provided for, the practice has been for Parliament to pass resolutions to describe.
Right.
And it's an international practice in various jurisdictions. So it's not only it's not a novel issue here in Uganda.
Yes.
It has happened elsewhere. Yes.
Let's hear from Mr. Luzige before you listeners calling. Yes, Mr. Luzige.
I still have a problem with Mr. Basalirwa's interpretation because he tells us what happens in other countries and fails to apply it in respect to Uganda. He says that in other countries where there is no concept of Parliament, Parliament comes up and makes a definition, a resolution, or pronounces itself on what amounts to concept of Parliament. Now, did our Parliament come up with that definition? They haven't. That's my argument. And you see, before, like I have said earlier on, before you charge someone, you must have an offense. The charge sheet must be very clear. It must clearly specify the offense which has been committed. That is basically my argument. What Parliament can do is to amend its resolution and move the President to take action against the Prime Minister and the ministers. What is unconstitutional is that Article 113 is very clear. It gives powers to the President to appoint and disappoint his ministers. And anyone and the President cannot be moved. And the President cannot be directed to take action until he is convinced.
Right.
And that business was saying that you asked him about recalling an MP. Parliament cannot. First of all, the law to recall an MP is very clear. It cannot be originated by Parliament itself.
Yes.
What Parliament can do is suspend. Parliament can only suspend the minister. But it cannot, a member of Parliament can only suspend the member of Parliament, but it cannot say that so-and-so has been chased out of Parliament indefinitely. Okay. They don't have those powers, and if they do so, they'll be unconstitutional. So, what I was, for example, I've heard Mr. Basalirwa saying that there's nothing unconstitutional about that. I want to give a scenario. Can Parliament, assuming court gave a decision on a matter, can Parliament come up with a resolution turning that decision?
All right.
It can't.
Let's hear from the listeners.
The doctrine of separation of powers is very alive to Uganda, and it has to be applied. That's my whole argument.
Let's hear from you, listeners. This is Spectrum on Radio, and tonight, understanding contempt of Parliament and the power of parliamentary resolutions. You can call in now. Our numbers 0414-348-111, 0312-260-390, 0312-261-390. Mr. Luzige, please do stay on the line. We'll get back to you as soon as we hear from the listeners. Spectrum, hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, sir. Your name?
Hello?
Hello, your name?
Good evening.
Good evening. Your name?
This is Deacon Luzige-Kamya.
Yes, Dickens.
I'd like to appreciate the arguments of both lawyers.
But I wanted to ask Mr. Asuman Basalirwa. Matter is defending the parliamentary resolution to force the minister to step aside. I wanted him to talk about this. Can Parliament make a resolution to have a judge get out of our job of his job? If, let's say, the ministers are appointed or decided to Parliament by the President for appointment, in that context, the Parliament does not have mandate to transfer and take the out of the office. It should be the court. If, let's say, Parliament had referred that matter, the conduct of ministers to court and then the court be set aside or step down, then ministers can go ahead. But Parliament itself, it can't be a judge, it can't be a prosecutor, it can't be everything. Matter they don't have mandate to force civil servants or political authorities to step aside. Therefore, they don't have powers. That's the reason it was made in context of their work. Thank you.
All right. Yes, you can also text in your message, question or comment. All you do is type the word Spectrum, leave a space, message, question or comment, send it to 7197. That's Spectrum, message body 7197. Yes, sir, your name?
Hello?
Hello, your name?
Hello?
Hello, you're live on Spectrum.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, your name?
Good evening, sorry.
Good evening.
I'm called Fred.
Fred.
I think the problem with our men's parliament, they seem to have an inflated ego. Mr. Basalirwa is telling us the law does not exist, but he's still telling us that someone broke a law. How does someone break a law that does not exist? Thank you.
All right. Spectrum, hello? Hello? You're live on air. Your name?
Hello.
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening. Your name?
This is Toby. Your volume is very low.
Your name again?
Your volume is very low on my side.
We can hear you very clearly. Your name and where you're calling from?
Yeah, my name is Otobi. I'm calling from Kampala.
Yes.
Now, thank you for the discussion. Three things. One, I would take the question of the minister stepping down. First of all, as a moral issue. It's an important thing, even if we are being in the legal perspective. But I think there should be a moral side to the issue, both on the side of the minister and for me, especially for the ministers, it is a moral question. It doesn't mean that they are guilty, but I think it's a kind of respect for institutions, but also setting a precedent. That is one. Two, I think for the ninth parliament, it is very clear that when this precedent is set, it's going to be a very difficult precedent to break in terms of how to ensure the rule of law and making sure that parliament is respected. And I think what members of parliament, whichever side they are in, they really have to hold it very seriously. There's an issue that is going to hold the ninth parliament until almost at the end of it. So they need to make it clear that it is not about the partition politics, but it's about the kind of precedent going to set. Third and lastly, I've always said that the ministers will not resign so long as the president doesn't want. Thank you.
Spectrum, hello?
Hello.
Yes, your name?
Good evening to you all.
Good evening, your name?
My name is Makoro Kazima. For me, I would first of all like to thank Mr. Basalirwa to stood firm with issues concerning peasants. But for me, I wonder, why do we think that those ministers are the ones being occupied in Chogam, Timangaro, now issue of oil is on the ground, and they are still in offices? For me, I would like to send my message to the president of this country. Why don't you accept those ministers to step aside? First of all, I wonder, President written a letter sending it to the parliament, saying they have any case to answer. He has been in Kanungu. I don't know, Mr. Basalirwa, how do you see that? President, when he was in Kanungu, he said nobody will downfall Mbabas because he knew Mbabas in 1970s. Does that mean that a person whom you know or a colleague or OP should should not be taken to court. I wonder where this country is going. My name is Makoro Kapuma.
Spectrum, hello. One final caller, then we'll hear from Spectrum, hello.
Hello?
Your name?
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Your name?
My name is David. And I must thank Mr. Basalirwa for the situation this evening. Now, I really don't agree with Mr. Luzige when he says that the appointing authority is the president is the one to demand or to direct the ministers to step aside while investigations are going on. But this is the same appointing authority which appointed ministers like Kakoza, Shebagara, and these other guys who Karagara action plan called Kamba. But the parliament didn't approve them, they didn't vet them. So why hasn't he forcibly appointed them ministers by going against the parliamentary approval? I can't disagree.
Okay, let's hear from Mr. Luzige first and foremost. Mr. Luzige. Okay, let's hear from our listeners as we. Okay, Spectrum, hello? Hello? Okay. We seem to have a problem with the line, so we can't get Mr. Luzige right now. Mr. Basalirwa.
Yes.
You can respond to the question.
Yes, Dickens was asking whether it's possible for Parliament to make...
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, your name? That's Mr. Luzige. You're welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. I have a problem with the network.
Okay.
I've actually listened in to all the callers.
Yes.
And it actually takes me back to what
You might need to lower the volume on your radio again.
Yes.
Go on.
Is that fine?
Good, that's better now.
Yeah, I said it actually goes back to two issues. Legal issues and moral issues. Just like Mr. Otovia has correctly pointed out, that majorly and basically the issue of the ministers resigning is a moral issue. And you see morals differ. I want to give you an example, Mr. Kizito. In some communities in Uganda, it is more a right for a man to chase a woman, wrestle her, and then she eventually becomes his wife. Whereas in some other communities, it is a taboo. So basically that is left to the conscience and interpretation of the concerned ministers. I don't want to sound like I'm actually doing a job of actually trying to exonerate the president. But you see, the president cannot just convict anyone when there is no evidence, when he's not convinced that actually these people have committed crimes. So I think really Parliament has got to come up first and prove that there is a problem with these ministers. And then secondly, but actually, first of all, Parliament must amend its resolution if the President is to act on it. But in its current form, it is actually very unconstitutional because the President, as the head of the executive arm of government, is protected by the Constitution and the separation of powers principle does to exist. I like the example Mr. Dickens Kagarula gave. That's the argument which my land colleague inside there is trying to give. That because Parliament has the powers to make resolutions, it can even, for example, wake up tomorrow and say, we are making a resolution that so-and-so judge should step aside. It's really that it would be very unconstitutional and contrary to principles of public policy. So I still do believe that much as Parliament may have a cause, the manner in which they've actually conducted this whole issue is one which is actually causing the problems. Let them first hear the ministers concerned. Let them give them a chance to be heard. Because you see, you remember, Mr. Moderator, there was a problem. There's a time when the Speaker called upon, for example, the Prime Minister to come and defend himself. And later on, the Prime Minister said, I didn't know I was being called as an individual or as a head or lead of government business in Parliament. So that actually takes me back to the issue of Parliament being the judge, the prosecutor, and at the same time, the accused. So I think we should be very clear on that. Legally speaking, I think there is a problem. But conclusively, positively. I do believe that the committee, which was empowered with the duty of finding out what amounts to contempt of court, is doing a very good job.
All right.
It has called all the legal brains and other concerned Ugandans to actually give us their interpretation. We are with their interpretation.
All right, Mr. Luzige, thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Basalirwa.
Yes. On the question of the Dickens,
yes,
who says, can Parliament make a resolution
to expel a judge?
It cannot. For one simple reason, there is a procedure in place in which a judge can be disciplined. And that procedure was established by Parliament. So the two cannot work.
Yes.
Now, this resolution, and in our lifetime, we have come across so many resolutions of Parliament. Okay? For example, a resolution recognizing the work of a deceased person.
Yes.
Okay? Where is the law to say that a deceased person will always be recognized by Parliament? It is not there. And by the way, the Constitution talks about vacation of office.
Yes.
In Article 108 for the case of a Prime Minister, in Article 116 for the case of ministers. This specific resolution is talking about stepping aside. Now, vacating and stepping aside are different.
Yes.
In the sense that stepping aside is temporary. And the justification that was given by the MPs was to allow a free investigation. It was not talking about permanently relinquishing their positions. I think that's where the problem is. When people begin saying it is the president with the mandate, the president will not tell a person to step aside. The president will tell a person to step aside, so will the parliamentary resolution. He's not talking about relinquishing or permanently vacating. It is talking about temporarily to pave the way. And as you see, it's a practice which can be looked at from the moral perspective, but in the case of parliamentary procedure, it's a practice which can be looked at from the legal perspective. So there is nothing out of the ordinary. And when we are talking about the absence of a law, it is true. As I said, you are going to have so many. Recently, I think Honorable Amongi was recognizing the fact that women in Saudi Arabia were allowed to vote in local council elections.
Yes.
Okay? And she was enjoining Parliament to take note of that.
Yes.
Where is it written in our laws?
Right.
So I think the arguments must not be diluted. That as long as there is nothing illegal, there is nothing unconstitutional with Parliament calling upon a minister to step aside to pave way for an investigation.
All right, we have to go. Thank you very much, our dear guests tonight, Mr. Asuman Basalirwa, president of the JEEMA Party, also a practicing lawyer and partner at Kamba Co. Advocates. Thank you very much for coming to Spectrum.
Thank you, and I thank management for inviting me.
Thank you very much. Our second guest, she appeared online. She joined us online. Mr. Joseph Luzige, legal officer in charge of special duties in the President's office, also from the Luzige-Kamya Co. Advocates. Thank you for tuning in. We got some calls, some text messages. I'll read them out very quickly before we go out. Spectrum, most of the resolutions have been implemented. Why is it equal to death for resolution number 9 to be implemented? Spectrum, Mr. Basalirwa, can Parliament remove the president by a mere resolution, or is it another process? Somebody else, Joseph, says this country is in a moral decay where when you hear the AG, Luzige and callers defending kinsmen, it's not surprising. Somebody else says, does Parliament have powers to appoint and disappoint? If yes, when do they exercise these powers? Then the last caller, Mark in Tinda, says, can Parliament recall any approved persons, judges, or the IPC? That one was dealt with. Others that were not dealt with, maybe we'll deal with them another time. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond Kizito. Spectrum will return tomorrow. Up next is a news in English.